Thanks very much for all contributing this evening. A number of things I picked out in terms of themes was this idea of the scorecard. And I just wanted to go down the line, and you've talked about it from a hiring perspective, but do you use any type of kind of scorecard or template mechanism in any other part of your sales process? Anybody want to pick that up? Okay.
Yes, I do. I guess it's about qualifying your prospect. So I think, again, it depends which methodology you want to use, depending on your experience, the type of company, the stage. But I think it's about understanding, how interesting the prospect is, how it fits in terms of your sales cycle for acceleration and for close. I mean, that's all. I mean, we can talk about it further.
Okay, sorry, just a quick bit of text here. So one thing I'm maniacal about on the partner side is to make sure that we have a business plan for each of our core partners. And you'd think that's obvious, but actually you'd be surprised, even in large organizations, that's often not in place. And it just gives us something to hold everybody accountable to. And actually the metaphor that I like to use for this is getting two companies to operate together is a little bit like getting two different systems to work together. And what do we use for that? We use a well-documented API for the techies in the room. And a business plan is nothing else than a well-documented API for two businesses to work together.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're lucky enough now. We're big enough. We have enough volume to have some great tools. Tools like Salesforce, tools like Anaplan. So we're very data driven, and we actually hire data scientists to support us in the sales cycle. So, we have quite a complex sales cycle with various stages, and I know how much gets converted from the very first sales stage to the very last sales stage, by rep, by vertical, and some conversion rates, let's say from marketing qualified lead to sales working. In some areas you see that it's 50%, in some areas it's 25%. So just understanding those numbers basically just directs you to the best practice that you can apply elsewhere, and where you might have to deep dive as a sales director. So I think it's not quite answering your question, but using data science and the great new tools that are out there is essential to sustain your growth.
So there has been a little bit of theme around arseholes tonight, and what is the one? A lot of people here have either been interviewed or actually interviewing people, and you can take this in different ways. One, I'd like to know like that. What's that one killer question that you ask that really gives you a read on someone, or is there an example of just experience recently where it's been a horrible interview, and is there a lesson to be learnt from that individual?
So yeah, obviously the last few months I have been interviewing, and as I said earlier, I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly. Now I'm not going to name names in terms of which organisation this was, just in case, but I did go through a certain process, and I said to you, the interview gives you a first view of what that organisation is going to be like to work for. And this particular, it was near the final stages of the interview. I was meeting the UK MD, and it was a role play type interview, which is fine. As salespeople, we all love a role play. So that was fine. But he, on purpose, decided to get up in the middle of the interview, getting his pen and throwing it aimed towards my head to see how I would react in the interview process. And see whether I would stay on track of the role play. Obviously, I didn't. I was like, why are you throwing a pen at my head at this interview for a relatively senior sales role? So that's probably my worst interview experience, and needless to say, I exited from that particular process. So that was the bad experience, but on to some of the more positives of how I guess you interview someone.
So a few good questions I always ask is what are your push factors away from where you are now, and what are the pull factors towards Box? And you always want to measure that the pull factors are greater than the push factors. You get a lot of salespeople that are desperate to get away for some kind of reason, and you need to find out what that reason is. Even if there is a valid reason why they're desperate to get away, perhaps they're working for one of those a-holes, but why do they want to come to you? That's the positive force coming forward. And I think the other way you find out is, this is a very small world. SaaS, cloud computing, technology in general is a very small world. The people that have burnt bridges, that have been aggressive, abrasive, and have attributes that are contrary to your own culture as a company, you can find that out very easily. We're only probably 2 steps away, or probably 1 step away from each other on LinkedIn. So, what I say to candidates is, or people leaving or joining a business, don't burn bridges. You keep true to your culture, because you'll get found out. So if you haven't got the killer question, you can still find out.
I mean, I always ask myself a sort of variation of the pub scenario question at the end of an interview. Would I want to sit next to this person at the Christmas party? Right? And if the answer is no, then probably not going to be a good fit.
Great. I've been asked this question, and I ask this question sometimes as well. What is your dream role? What's your dream job? And actually, sometimes people are very scripted. They come prepared with absolutely everything. But if you ask them that question, it takes them into a different place. And actually, it's very interesting to see, what is it that they really would like to do, other than sell SaaS software.
Yeah, actually, that is an interesting question. I think there's a lot of occasions, particularly if you're an early stage business, or even if you're a late stage and you're hiring SDRs or kind of graduates into the workforce. There's been a couple of scenarios recently where I've asked them that question, what's your dream role? Bear in mind this is a sales job, and they say, I'd really like to get into PR. So why are you sitting here in front of me? So, I think it's important. You do need to call out people in interviews. Okay, so final question before we open it up and the pizzas. Look, they're just teasing us. Sorry. One of the interesting things I've noted here, there's 2 experienced Salesforce reps, and it just occurs to me, we were talking about Simon O'Kane over at Qualtrics. At SaaS Growth we had Stuart Templeton at Slack. What do you think the impact Salesforce has had on the kind of global ecosystem of software? And, those of you that have had personal experience, can you just share some insight on that? Because I think it's fascinating.
That's a big question. I think we have to acknowledge that they are the pioneers of sort of enterprise SaaS as we know it, right? So they have introduced a whole bunch of things. And we talk about SaaS, software as a service, and we get caught up in infrastructure, but really the whole idea of moving to a subscription model of consume it, pay for it as you consume it model, that's pretty radical. That was very, very radical, right? So that's a massive impact. And we all take that for granted now, but anybody who's worked for SAP and other on-premise software companies, that's a huge shift. And that also means that we've taken much more care of our customers, because we have to win back our customers at the end of every year. Whereas if you're selling SAP or Oracle on-premise software, you go in there, you do the big deal, you leave your CD-ROM behind, and that's it. You walk out, and that's kind of the end of the deal. Whereas for us now in this world, that's the beginning of the relationship. So I think that's probably the biggest shift that I've seen. That's kind of permeated throughout the entire industry.
Yeah, they were the pioneers. I remember having to train salespeople on what SaaS was and how to explain it to CIOs. And some CIOs would still say, no, I want to go to your data center. I want to see where my rack is. So they think, no, it's a multi-tenant cloud. It doesn't exist. And now when we're in a sales cycle, especially in some new markets, some international markets, we always ask the question, have you bought SaaS before? Are you familiar with the contractual terms? It's the data privacy type agreements. And what was great about Salesforce, they laid the road for us. And the first SaaS company to sell into an organization has the toughest job, because they've got that education to do. They've got those contracts. Even now we do see, and we had one the other day. I'm not sure if Amy's still in the room. She's our lawyer. And it was, we want it on your paper. They sent us a contract through, and it was an on-prem type. Can we come and see our servers in your data center type of thing. So it's much easier for the rest of us. The more SaaS companies that have been on that road before us in each account, the better. So we should thank Salesforce for leading the way.
I think just something I'd add to that, only because I know it from my husband works at Salesforce, and I'm at a very early stage startup. So my founder went to me the other day. He's like, Laura, can you find out? I need to understand what we're going to do about pricing. I've heard a rumor that Salesforce are going to start looking at active user pricing, similar to Slack and fair billing policies and all of that good stuff. And interestingly, you talk about Salesforce paving the way. They are starting to look at active user pricing models, and I think that will be a humongous shift. At the point that Salesforce start to go from a per seat to active user will be very, very interesting. And I think that will then have ripples and waves in terms of other SaaS organizations and how they look at their pricing strategies. So
quick response to that. So one of the reasons I left Salesforce was that it started to look, feel and smell like Oracle. And you've just confirmed that. So I'm glad I left.
Well, I worked for Exactly, which is a Salesforce partner, and then what I learned a lot about Salesforce and the model there, and now working in a small startup, I actually pretty much followed the model and the best practice of bringing to market, completely new solution. And as you say, the fact that the road has been paved, I show up in big organizations with my T's and C's, my software services agreement, cloud-based software, and there's nobody has a problem with that. And that's amazing, because I think that's, again, that ripple effect in a positive way, where now much smaller companies can have access to the enterprise market, like Slack and others, because of that initial innovation.
Thank you. Okay, so have we got any questions in the room for the panel? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Anybody? Oh, we got one. Go on, Alex. What's your biggest motivation to get out of bed?
Okay, that's a great question for me. So I changed very much. I was selling accounting software to CFOs when I worked at Oracle, and now I'm trying to change the world by helping individuals have better mental health. So that is actually a big purpose for me, and that does get me up in the morning. Thank you.
I can't believe you asked that question. You've seen where we work, right?
I'll do the serious one. Is very similar to you. It's the why. Is there an emotive purpose to the sell? And the one that I'm enjoying 3 weeks into my job, being based at Founders Forum, which I know James know, is the other day I was sat unknowingly next to the guy that invented the internet, Sir Tim Berners-Lee. So that was quite interesting to have a conversation with him.
Brilliant. So for me, I love building teams, and I love helping teams fulfill their full potential. So we're at a point at Box where, whilst we have this lovely office, I want a lovely office like this in every major city in EMEA, and that's a 3 or 4 year journey. So that's why I get up. And the other thing that gets me up nowadays, because I've been doing this for some time, is I do a lot of charitable work as well. So I'm chair at Brains Trust, a brain tumour charity, and I get more out of those board meetings than I do out of our own here sometimes. So hopefully during our careers we can all find ways to give back.
Great final way to end. Is there one more burning question? Oh, no, everyone wants to go and ask a question. All right, go on, my man. Oh, ladies first then. The lady in front, and then you can go. That's it. Go on. Great question, because I think particularly with LinkedIn and GDPR now, everyone's on LinkedIn firing us a connection request and notes. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly?
I think there's two things really. One, preparation, right? Know who you're talking to and what you're going to talk about, and do the research. And then the second one is not listening, right? So if they just have a pre-prepared spiel and you're sort of coming up with additional bits of information or questions and they're not deviating from that, that's a really major turn-off, I would say.
Are there any Box OBRs in the room? Yeah. So that's our outbound sales team. We call them outbound reps. And quite often they talk to me, and I might disillusion them because I spend most of my time being really productive and avoiding that experience of an inbound call. So when somebody does get through to me through sheer perseverance, or they got lucky, I picked up the phone, I want to hear a really good, compelling story that, to Florian's point, it is well prepared, is meaningful, to me and my business and is tuned to my needs that they've already worked out. And when that happens, I will give them a meeting.
One framework, I don't know if anyone is called Show Me You Know Me. There used to be this approach in the US called Basho, and it was a bit of a methodology. It's quite old school, but Show Me You Know Me is the concept of you can find that information out on LinkedIn about someone. Why are you sending a standard template? Pull out something from their profile. The other thing is we're all encouraged to be active, socially on LinkedIn. I used to work there. We bang on about it all the time. But actually, if people were tweeting or someone's posting something on LinkedIn, leverage that. Like actually hyperlink. I saw you said this. I know you like that. You work at this company. Show them you know them. So show me you know me is a good concept. Last question, and then we'll break up. Go on. Great question.
Yeah, great question. I think the key for me is about really identify who are the candidates that have that talent to be leaders. So some people are amazing as individual contributors, account managers, account directors, whatever you want to call them. You can give them more responsibility. You can give them more exposure. You can work on the comp plan. So in essence, it's about finding their signature strengths, their talent, and also addressing what drives them, what takes them, so you can keep them and you retain that talent. But what you don't want to do, and I don't like doing, is to just naturally, promote them to sales director or sales VP just because that's the natural progression in sales, because that's when you actually can really mess up your sales team and the motivation, because leadership is very different than executing in sales. Some people can do both, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's a really big challenge, right? Because we operate in relatively flat organizations. We have a lot of talent, and we have people in roles, and we don't have enough opportunity for people to move up. I think we need to separate moving up from being promoted and moving through and up in the organization, and somehow show them a path across, down, and by down I don't mean demoting, but I think getting more expertise and more deep into your subject matter, and also across geographically, providing opportunities for people to move across different countries, build up expertise that way. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't think it's an easy solution.
Yeah, it's something very close to my heart, I think, because I've spent probably the majority of my sales career as an individual contributor. This is probably my first, I guess, proper VP sales leadership role, and I was really cognizant when I was looking for the next right role that, to some of what the VCs said, I'm a bit of a sales maverick, and I know that the founder, in terms of what he wanted from someone as the first salesperson on the ground at the organization, was someone that would roll their sleeves up, that wouldn't come in and start going, pipeline reporting, getting a great CRM. It was all about, we just need some deals done and under the table. All of that good stuff can come. And at that point, for me personally, that will be the point where I go, am I the right fit still for this organization? Or is it time to do it again? Or am I ready to step up? But yeah, speaking from the heart here, I'm probably in that jump at the moment between individual contributor to finding my feet as what does a sales leader really mean in a pre-Series A startup, which is very different to a sales leader in an established organization.
Yeah, I think you don't need a talent management system or Workday or SuccessFactors to do this as a small organization. But you do need to have the conversations with people about where they're going, what they're doing, what their aspirations are. For some people, just being out of a comfort zone and being stretched all the time is enough to keep them in the game for you. And now in this large company, we're in a position to say to people, seniority can come in your role as an individual contributor. In some organizations, there are SVP level reps focused on the very largest enterprises doing amazingly big deals. So there are lots of options. It's mainly about just talking and communicating with your team. I mean, a fast growth startup, the growth itself will lead to opportunities naturally. When you slow down to 30-40% growth, then it becomes a bit more of a challenge. But yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for all of our speakers this evening? Thank you.